If I may invite all of the speakers from this morning to the table, we'll have our question and answer session. For the members of the audience, while everybody's coming up and settling in, I would like to remind you to identify yourself and your affiliation as you approach the microphone stands for the benefit of all. Do we need one more chair? One more chair.
Thank you, dear. The one in a dress is the one that's carrying the chair.
All right, make me feel bad. All right. Ms. Silk, we'll start with you and some questions from our audience in internet land.
I'm Susan Silk from OLA, but I'm standing here in my job as a member of this committee to bring forward questions that we got from our audience on the internet, and to also remind the audience that we have a bulletin board outside, and if you would like me to ask your question for you, if you post it up there, I will do that. But first, I have two questions from me, representing myself. And one of them is, are mice companion animals in Virginia? Research mice?
Yes. They're going to be companion animals until the point, again, that they're actually in a research facility.
Well, the USDA doesn't inspect mice, so if they went to a pharmaceutical house where there's no USDA oversight, they would continue to be companion animals throughout the time they're in research.
That is a good question. And it's a bit of a gray area. Generally speaking, though, if they're being managed under a facility-approved IACUC protocol, we are generally going to consider them to be research animals and not subject to the body of our companion animal laws.
And my other...
I would just say that would apply to most birds and other species that are not currently or are just coming under Federal Animal Welfare Act compliance. So generally speaking, there is a bit of a protective bubble around any animal as long as the facility itself is licensed and the animal is being managed under an IACUC protocol.
And my other question is, I think it would be just terrifying to open a box of unknown something. How do your inspectors approach, by the time you've identified something that has to be opened, you're pretty confident there's something in there that shouldn't be. How do you handle that?
In a cargo environment, they're not actually open. In a passenger environment, they're not necessarily or automatically open. When it's referred to the agriculture secondary, there's a couple of things that we do. One is kind of questioning, intensive questioning to find out, what is the content, where it's going to, who are you, and all those kind of stuff to find out exactly what's in there. And the minimum requirement that we do is, for a luggage, for instance, is we do non-intrusive inspection, which is running that through X-ray. It's only when we think that it's safe, then that's when we open it. Now, there are instances, for instance, when it's very clear that, for instance, there's a live animal in there. And there were instances when I was an inspector at the port of entry that couple of instances. One, there was a boa constrictor in the luggage, and the other one, there is a live iguana in the luggage. Mm-hmm. So what we do in that case, we don't open that. We take it to a holding facility, which we usually have.
Or call us.
and we would have the traveler accompany us, and they would open the luggage and put it in a holding cell. And then we would call Fish and Wildlife, and between them and the traveler, we would decide exactly what to do with it. A lot of times they're coming in as pets. And so the presentation that I had are pretty much simplified. What we do is like, we would give the traveler the options of what does he really want. We have so many options, whether if he prefers to abandon it, then we'll take care of it. And because it's pets, usually they would like to take care of it. And, there's, for as long as, if they don't have the requirements, input requirements, for instance, they would work with us and we would work with the traveler and Fish and Wildlife to make sure that, they comply with it.
Next question.
Now we have some questions from the audience online, and you guys are giving good questions, so keep sending those in to us. I'm going to read these two together because I think they're related, and perhaps you can answer them both with one answer. Where do animals go after they are seized? Are they returned to their country of origin, euthanized, or other? What happens to the animals that are seized, especially the roosters that were personal pets?
When a live animal, for instance, like that comes in with no import permit, it's not necessarily and it's not automatic that we would seize that. We would offer the traveler options. What does he want to do? If he wants to abandon it, if he wants to, in a land border, for instance, there we have that they have that opportunity to actually take that back to either Canada or Mexico. Now the problem is like when they're coming from other countries overseas, that's where the challenge is, and a lot of times they would abandon it. In which case we would seize it. We would file all the necessary documentations, CBP documentations, abandonment form, seizure form, and also a VS transfer form, which is a VS 17-8. What happens after that is going to be VS's responsibility. In the case of that rooster, what happened with that is like initially the traveler just want to abandon it and get the headache out of his head, and then later on he decided, well, this roosters or this chicken costs a lot, so he decided to just have it re-exported. So he has that option. So that whole package got re-exported back to Mexico.
Regarding X-ray of luggage and cargo, are X-rays performed on rodents destined for research? Some shippers adhere a sticker that says "Do not X-ray." Is this sticker necessary for rodent shipments? Will CBP personnel adhere to the request not to X-ray? Are there any tests specific to rodent shipping containers, such as wiping them for explosive residue? Mouse bombs.
There's a lot of things that we do other than regulate live animals at the ports of entry. And you mentioned security. One of the mission that we have is actually interdicting tools of, weapons of mass destruction and also contrabands like drugs, for instance. So at ports of entry, especially in land borders, officers would have what we call portable radiation devices that actually sends out some alarm if there's some explosives or radioactive materials in there. And believe me, there's a lot of things that are coming. It's not because there's that malintent, but because some truck had brought in or had carried, say, pieces of X-ray equipment that's destined for destruction, and there's some little piece of the equipment that's in there, and those PRDs are very sensitive. If one of the things that we looked at whenever a shipment arrives is the import permit, because that will tell, and also the manifest, because that will tell us a lot the contents of the cargo, and also the purpose for which that cargo is intended for. If it's live animals, no, we don't X-ray them, especially for research, because that's going to contaminate, or whatever it is that whatever it's going to fall out.
Might influence the research.
So we look at that. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is no mandate to actually put a sticker in there for research. The permit would actually tell us that. Now, is there a possibility that they may get X-ray? Yeah, there is that possibility. And it's not because, there is that intent to actually X-ray them regardless, but because there is that suspicion coming from somewhere else. Mm-hmm. that actually mandates us to X-ray that.
And then if you had to do that, X-ray those animals, say they were mice, would you let the research facility know that they had been X-rayed?
What we would actually do, and that's a very good question, is before we even do anything about that, there is going to be a constant communication, continuous flow of information, exchange of information between the broker, the importer of record, and any third party associated with that shipment, to make sure that they are aware of what's happening. And a lot of times they will be there at the port of entry to make sure that they actually know and they have the approval to actually do whatever we need to do on that.
Thank you.
Sure.
My name is Carl Cole. I'm with Cole Consulting, my own firm. My question is to Dr. Clarke regarding the new rule in terms of imports of dogs, the 6-month import, and of more import licensing also. U.S. carriers are licensed. Are foreign flags entering our airspace also licensed?
That's a very good question. And I'll be honest, I don't have an answer for that. I know that we are concerned when planes come in from another country and there's something, the animals are not treated well. I do not believe that they are licensed under our jurisdiction, as we license businesses in this country. I just know that we do have the right to take a look at how these animals are treated, and we do follow up on that. But I can explore that when I get back and get you a better answer.
Thank you so much. The other question would be to Mr. Lapitan. Did I pronounce that right? It seems to me you must work with also the DEA. You're kind of the police when you were talking about looking for drugs, those types of things. That's part of your mandate. Are you also the enforcer for fish and wildlife for CITES species coming into the country?
Anything that has got to do with fish and wildlife, we would actually refer everything to Fish and Wildlife for adjudication.
Okay, thank you. And this is a question, this is my last one, to everyone that's up here. I've listened to permits, forms, PS 623. It just went on and on and on, and I was just thinking about all the trees that have probably been killed. Where are all of your agencies in terms of electronic communication, in terms of permitting, in terms of allowing shippers to get this information to you ahead of time, especially when you're trying to vet them and the animals that they're shipping? Thank you.
We'll have time for one, maybe two more questions.
Hi, this is Gary Egrie. I was asked earlier to just emphasize that both AITA and the OIE are pushing to have the health certificates moved to electronic version, so hopefully that does happen.
And speaking from CDC, everything's on the web. You can go on CDC's website, www.cdc.gov, and animal importations, and you can find what you need from CDC's perspective.
But you can't sign it electronically. You can't fill it out electronically.
Some of it you can, but some of it does require a signature.
Same thing, we do have a lot of our forms on the website, and maybe Gary, the VS 147 form, can that be totally completed on the website?
I don't know that, sorry.
Okay.
Speaking for CBP, we are into the modernization aspects that we're converting to electronic filing. In fact, I was involved with the automated commercial environment system where brokers and porters of record had got to file all their entries and stuff. But that doesn't mean that we are totally out of it, because we have situations, especially in the southern land borders, where cattle are herded by foot. So, there's still some paper trails. So,
I'll just say from a state perspective, I mean, Virginia, like many states, is making its first forays into electronic CVIs, and hopefully that trend will continue. But state resources are very tight across the board right now, and particularly when it comes to issues such as this, the money is hard to get. So, at the state level, if you're doing a lot of business with a particular state, you're going to need to probably approach the budget decision makers and plant that seed, because it's been very difficult for states to get resources for a lot of things regarding animal health and welfare. And most states have other priorities that are currently unfunded before we get there. So that's a struggle at the state level.
And then with Fish and Wildlife, our declarations have been electronic for over a decade now, and we have electronic payments, and we can do our electronic declarations. We can do the documents that come with it, except with the exception of the CITES documents. You can upload those documents on, and we're working on getting the applications for the import-export license electronic.
Hi, I'm Lynn Anderson. I'm the co-chair of the ILAR Roundtable. I also work for Covance, and I want to thank all the speakers for really informative presentations. My question is for Dr. Kovich. Can you just clarify what's required for the enclosure for dogs? I probably misunderstood, but I saw something about having a bench and something about solid floor, and that's not typical of during transportation of an enclosure for dogs.
Sure, that would be one area then where Virginia would set a more strict standard. Basically, any sort of wire grid floor for dogs in Virginia is difficult to do in a compliant fashion. Most people have moved away from it. The grid has to be of a small enough size to allow the animal's feet not to slip through, of a material that's not going to cut or lacerate the foot, and it's going to need to provide a solid resting platform. So during transportation, yes, and that has been challenged. I mean, that's it. There is no exemption during transportation for having a strictly wire grid floor. Certainly not for any sort of double-decker or multiple stacking of animals in that environment. Not a bench. It can. I mean, if the enclosure has a solid floor, then it's compliant. If it has a wire grid floor, it has to have a resting platform for the animal, big enough for the animal to lie on in a relatively normal posture.
Hi, I have a question for the whole panel, maybe even some speakers from yesterday. I'm not sure exactly. So it's clear to me from all the conversations and the presentations, all of which were extremely informative, that there are a number of places where things can go wrong that can result in animals staying in an import place or place of entry, whatever you want to call it, for more than an hour. That can be a day, that can be 3 days, I don't know how long. But based on, for example, your presentation where you have to call in USDA, Fish and Wildlife, this, that, the other. So I was wondering, what exactly happens to these animals during that time? Do you bring in, and that's to everyone, do you bring in vets to take care of them? Is there a holding facility appropriate? What happens until such time as the shipment is clear to proceed?
Well, I think it depends on what the violation is. With Fish and Wildlife jurisdiction animals, if there's a violation and it cannot be cleared, again, depending on the violation, if it's not going to be one of those animals that has to be turned around and sent back to the country where it came from, then what we do is we take the animals, again, depending on what it is, to an AZA-approved facility, and it's not left in the crate. There is steps to be taken to care for the animal. There is a Lacey Act account. It's a reward account for that is paid by people that we prosecute, and fines that are paid go to an account that help pay for these. These are for the animals that we seize, not for the animals that are detained for, because certain pieces the importer is going to pay for. If there's a problem with a permit, and we're waiting for verification from from a foreign country, then the importer will be paying. That's the expectation for the importer to be paying for those things. But we find suitable care for that animal until the things are rectified.
From CDC's standpoint, we don't have this happen very often, but when we do have animals like dogs that can't clear, they're still in the control of the airline. So it's actually the airline's responsibility to make sure they're cared for. We have had dogs that have had to be taken to facilities to hold until they can be released, taken to vet clinics and things like that. And it's actually the airline's responsibility because the animal hasn't cleared. Now the airline, ultimately it's the responsibility of the importer. Now for our non-human primates, we work very closely with our registered importers. We ask them to have contingency plans if something goes wrong somewhere, how they are going to deal with that. And so we work very closely with them to make sure that the non-human primates, because those non-human primates can't be unloaded just anywhere. So we have worked with them. It doesn't happen, again, it doesn't happen very often, but we do try to work very closely with them.
I think this last question has generated quite a bit of discussion, and I see nods and hands in the audience that would like to also comment on this. Unfortunately, we are a bit behind schedule today, so I encourage everybody to continue those discussions throughout lunch, and write them on the board, and we'll address them perhaps in this afternoon's question and answer session. I want to thank today's panel of speakers, and we will have a continuation of this morning's session with Dr. David Kurtz from the National Institute of Environmental Health and Sciences, bringing to us our first interactive session of the day. So please all get out your cell phones, get out your tablets, and log on to the website.